Hey everyone, it is Eric Machnez, Director of Organizational Development at Red Clover.
And Jen Lestrange, the CEO at Red Clover.
Red Clover is a strategic HR and change management consulting firm based out of Parsippany, New Jersey, but with clients across the country.
And a few operations overseas now.
Yeah.
So things are moving and shaking around.
Yeah, it's really exciting. So we thought it would be a really good opportunity to bring back Coffee Chat in the new year and to really talk about the key differences between the HR consulting services that our firm provides to small businesses compared to the HR consulting services that you may receive through your PEO or payroll provider.
Yeah, I think that's a good time to talk about. It's hard sometimes for companies to really understand the differences.
First and foremost, Jen, I think ultimately, why don't you just really briefly talk about the type of HR consulting services that Red Clover provides?
Okay, I'm happy to do that. Okay, so we are a fractional outsourced HR provider. So we basically will scope out what an organization needs based on the processes that they've got in scope from an HR lifecycle and the size of the organization and the maturity of those HR processes. And then we kind of figure out what the fees need to be per month. So it's a fixed price per quarter where we're looking at, all right, this is what we're going to do in Q1. This is how it's going to scope out. This is the size of the organization, how that's going to influence that number. And that way the client knows what the bill is going to be each month. But we also have the flexibility each quarter, which as the organization changes, as we might swap processes in and out of scope, one quarter we might do performance reviews, another quarter we might do compensation. It allows us to kind of navigate those processes and also the pricing so that we're meeting the business where they need to be.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the immediate key differences that I see with the way that we offer and price compared to the way that a payroll or PEO provider may price. Generally, in my experience, they're always going to do pricing not necessarily based on what they are able to provide, but they're going to keep within their similar pricing model for payroll and other services a dollar amount per head count per month.
PEPM is what I see. It's kind of a dial-a-friend, right? You call up. It's like, hey, I have a question on how this law applies to my workforce. Can you help me? But it's certainly not work plan based.
Yeah, and I would say that probably in those situations where it is a phone a friend, it may work for that very small business that isn't in a position to pay for our services. Very simply put, we started about $6,000 a month for our monthly retained agreement. And I can understand why maybe someone with one or two employees may find more value in that dial-a-friend model. But what I'll also point out is I do think that a lot of that information through the PEO and payroll consulting service is available through like an HR information resource depository, like Mineral. And generally what happens is when you're calling that dial-a-friend, they are ultimately using the same resource that they may say, and they may say to you, oh, if this is the answer I'm going to give you, but you can also look at this information available to you through our platform by looking at this article. So it's not necessarily individualized support. It tends to be generalized HR guidance for the general HR problems or questions that a smaller business may encounter.
Things that don't require a lot of intervention, right? So you have a question on, I don't know, vacation or let's say sick time entitlement in a particular state. That's something where you can call up and someone can tell you what the rules are, and that's about it. I think for me, what I see is the biggest difference, and what I get as feedback from clients who come to us is that there's no scenario in where a consulting service through a PEO or payroll is actually going to know who you are when you call, because they're assigned to like 100 clients.
Right.
So like they just can't keep up with it. So you're getting a different person every time you call, or if it's the same person, they've talked to 30 other businesses the same day. They're not going to remember what industry you're in or how many people you have or like what is on your mind as far as the criticality.
And I think that's one of the key differences that ultimately when I do speak to individuals who kind of say, oh, well, we already have HR consulting with our PEO or payroll provider, I'm like, here's one of the key differences. If you're working with a consultant from Red Clover, where you have direct access to us, whether it be through company email, whether you have our cell phone, and we're able to bring that knowledge of your business to every call that you take with us, especially if we're talking about a specific employee issue or a specific employee.
I mean, we know the employees.
Yeah, we
Like,
have. Yeah, we
it's
have.
like, hey, Dave's got an issue with
Yeah.
da da da. Oh, okay. Well, we know Dave's like because we're doing the employee relations.
Yeah. Whereas if you're calling the payroll and PEO provider, you may end up waiting on a customer service hold, and then you talk to one
Then you're
of their
offshored.
yeah, or you talk, and then you're talking to one of their agents who really doesn't have the background information or data that you've previously shared with someone else assigned to the account. So I think that's one of the key differences is we're so embedded in the organization, and since we are actively handling the employee relations, there's not a lot of catch up when someone calls me and says, hey, we're having a problem with this person again, or I need clarity on the situation that we were talking about yesterday.
Or the employees coming to us directly.
Yep.
I mean, sometimes it's like we're informing the CEO of something going on because it's come to us before them, which is the right way it needs to. I mean, at least in our context, that's how we want it to go.
And I would say that that is the one thing that I've seen in speaking to a number of vendors in the space. They maintain that they or their HR consultants will not interface directly with your employees.
Yeah.
So it does create this type of middleman situation. Whereas if you're working with us, generally we are the individual who may serve as the go-between between the manager and the employee. And the employees, like you said, come directly to us so that we can escalate the message up. And we can also just save a lot of time for the manager or the CEO because generally we can address the employee issue just with our knowledge that we've gained over.
And sometimes it's not hard.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Or things that may seem hard to a business owner because we do it day in and day out, it's just not as hard.
Let's talk about, I think what's useful to understand is the level of liability that both a PEO, mainly a PEO and a shared employment relationship takes on if they are offering kind of HR consulting and guidance, and how that compares to the risk profile in working with us.
Okay. So just as a primer for folks so a PEO is a professional employment organization. It means that essentially they are becoming the employer of record for the employees. Typically that starts because you want to get better pricing for group health care or some sort of reason why you want someone in the middle kind of managing that employment relationship. Specifically around things like layoffs and restructuring, it means that you're asking permission of the PEO before you're doing anything. So that decision-making power is somewhat shared, usually not to the same degree the liability. So oftentimes a PEO will hold the EPLI insurance, so the employer's practice liability insurance. And you're asking permission because they need to approve the layoffs so that if there is an adverse action down the track, you still have access to the insurance to cover legal fees around that or however the insurance policy is structured. They don't necessarily take on responsibility for certain decisions. So it's still the company that can be named in a lawsuit. Same would hold true in an investigation if there was a claim of sexual harassment or wrongful hiring practices or whatever it is. The company's still liable in that sense. And in that particular case with the HR consulting stuff, they're not necessarily going to provide the guidance to help you navigate through that. I will say on our side, we don't necessarily take on the client's liability either. So we're very careful about the indemnification in those contracts. We're also really proactive about engaging with legal counsel when we feel that there's an issue that we need to work through carefully.
When a client comes to work with us, they've had the opportunity to vet our experience, vet our certifications, and we're able to speak to the fact that we've dealt with a lot of potentially risky situations in our practical experience. So they can be confident in our guidance when it comes to situations that eventually we need to involve legal counsel with, but we have enough street cred and experience to be able to kind of walk the client to that line and say, hey, this is our HR guidance. We have the experience. We've been here before. Now let's connect you with our employment attorney. Whereas again, you don't necessarily know the experience that the HR consultant assigned to you through your PEO or payroll provider.
You have no idea what they've got.
You don't know what they have. And again, I think I would go back to the idea that they probably have very strict operating procedures in regards of, okay, when this situation comes up, review your manual, give them this guidance.
Your handbook says.
And you ultimately, there comes a point where that individual probably feels uncomfortable walking up to that line. Like, one, with our experience as a shared team, and also just the experience around the table, especially with your levels of expertise and years in the field, as well as mine, the more seasoned professionals, we're able to really help the client kind of get to the point where they're getting some really good individualized, tailored support for a thorny situation, continue to navigate it in a way that protects, you know, the company, but also the employee feels like they're being heard, listened to, respected.
I think when I'm talking to clients, or even like potential clients, right? And they get a little like, oh, so you guys don't provide the legal guidance. I said, we don't. We're not lawyers, and we're not trying to be lawyers, and we're pretty proactive about engaging with counsel. But here's the interesting part, because they're always really, oh, well, that's going to cost me so much more money. It is amazing how much, like, we're just faster and to the point.
Yep.
We're not going through this whole explanation process of the story behind what's happened. And we do it so regularly. It's like, okay, this is the issue. This is the law that we think we're bumping up against. These are our options. Yep. This is the conversation we want to have. And by the way, you're going to have it, either we'll have it with you, or we'll say, listen, we'd like you to have a privileged conversation with the client. Yep. Come back to us with whatever recommendations they come with. But this is what you need to know going into that conversation. Yeah. It is such an accelerator. And that's the feedback I get from the lawyers as well. They were like, it's just so much faster.
Yeah.
We can cut to the chase. We know exactly what we need to do. We know the risk profile. If there's two options, we know the options on either side, and we just move through it faster. Yep. And the engagement with the lawyers is just so much more higher value to them, and they can really, you know, do their best work.
Yeah, I mean, a really practical example is I've worked with enough employment lawyers now that ultimately, if a client's working through a termination, and we're working to complete a separation and general release agreement, rather than the lawyer having to get on the phone with the client and be like, okay, this is all the information I need, I'm able to email the lawyer directly and say, hey, we need a separation and general release for this employee. This is the state that they live in. This is the things you need to consider when writing it. This is the potential severance that they want to pay out. All really the key information that, again, saves time and money for the client, because I know what the employment lawyer needs. And because they're part of our network and we've worked with them, I understand their rhythms. And again, like you said, it's an accelerator, and it does save time and money. HR consultant through your PEO and payroll provider is definitely not going to talk to employment counsel.
No, they're not doing that.
And I would also say that employment counsel would be really reticent to ultimately involve them in that discussion. Yeah. Whereas we're kind of in a unique position where we have the opportunity to do so proactively and effectively. Yeah. In your opinion, what would be the trigger for someone to say, you know, maybe I need to work with Red Clover as my outsourced HR consulting firm, rather than solely relying on the HR consulting services that I get through my payroll and my PEO?
I think once it gets to a certain number of headcount, because statistically there's more things that happen when there's more people. So, you know, is it 10 employees? I don't know. Maybe it's more like 25, but it's somewhere around there where it's like, all right, there's a certain meaningful population where there's questions that come up, and sometimes it's simple stuff, but it's just getting it off your plate so that you can focus on the other parts of scaling the business. So it takes all of that, and some of it's operational and administrative, right? But it's also like, okay, hey, I need a real budget for workforce planning, because I'm growing. I might be 10 people today, but next year I'm going to be 30. What does that look like? Yeah. So with any of those kind of conversations where it's like, I know where I want to take this business, but I'm not quite sure how to build it in, PEO can't do that. They're just not skillful.
In my experience, anecdotally, it's when the CEO or CFO who has kind of taken over HR as the business grows, they are spending more time responding to email concerns and forwarding along to their payroll and PEO provider for responses, when ultimately the better solution is working with a group like us who can just handle those concerns directly. All right, well, thanks so much for tuning in. And if you are looking to potentially work with an outsourced HR partner, feel free to reach out to us. Otherwise, like, comment, subscribe, and share.
Share with your friends.
Share with your friends who are small business owners would be great, specifically in construction, IT, architecture, professional services, or family offices. That would be great. And we'll see you next time.